All right, and we're live. And free agency has been fun so far for the Packers. A bit more active than we're used to year in and year out, looking a bit more like that 2019 season where we're really kind of attacking from the free agent market, signing Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney, then bringing back a number of our guys. Really, all of our exclusive rights free agents are back. And on top of that, we just got the news this evening that looks like AJ Dillon's going to be back for the Packers as well. So, really shoring up that running back position, taking a step with that safety position, and then um, moving on from some of the elder statesmen that the Packers have had. But today we're going to talk about what is that impact on the draft side. And we're going to run through a 4-round mock draft with 6 weeks left into the NFL draft now. Let's just dive right into it and see what does it look like for the Packers possibly going into the draft. So NFL or PFF has updated their mock draft simulator a little bit, added a piece to account for external boards outside of just the PFF board. A lot of the PFF simulations had guys like Cooper DeJean going top 10 because he's number 6, I believe, on their big board, and nobody's really expecting to go quite that high at this point. So we're going to see you know, how all of this shakes out a little bit. It does look like they still need to address the team needs piece a little bit, but we'll just dive right into the mock draft here. So, take a look at what happened earlier on here. No huge surprises. Maybe JJ McCarthy at 6 is a little bit rich, but I mean, we've got a lot of news around the NFL that sounds like, teams are kind of pushing him up. Minnesota is one of those teams that's highly interested in him. Looks like a little bit of a run on a few of the tackles here. Got 4 and 5 picks right in here. A couple earlier than that, a few edges off the board. But it plays out relatively nicely for us here. Um, Everybody thinks the Cooper DeJean pick is kind of like canon at this point. Like, we've talked about it too much to the point that it's not going to happen. Um, I don't know. We'll see. Graham Barton's a name that's tossed around a whole bunch. Obviously, Tyler Nubin is still one that's out there. We do still need a running mate to go alongside McKinney in the back end because, you know, Savage is gone. Jonathan Owen signed with the Bears. Um, Rudy Ford is still kind of up in the air. He might be a nice target for the Packers to actually try to bring back. I think he might pair pretty well with McKinney and at least be a little bit of a stopgap. But if you bring him back, that doesn't necessarily preclude you from taking another safety that could fill that role in the draft as well. Um, let's. I'm just gonna go Cooper DeJean because this is the first time he's actually fallen to me in any of these mocks. I do really like him as a player, a lot of versatility, and can very much, I think, in a lot of ways, be used in a similar fashion to how the Packers are going to probably use McKinney. And I think that kind of versatility that we're going to have on the back end, if we have guys that can do more than one thing, it's going to free the Packers defense up in that coverage unit to kind of take a different approach to how they go about doing things, really keeping the offense off balance and making them have to think a bit about what they're doing, to attack that defense because I'm expecting a lot more disguised coverages, a lot of, you know, motion or changing in coverage like personnel right up until the snap of the ball. So I think that's going to be something that, Cooper DeJean would be able to bring to us. I think he's got the ability to play outside, but also inside, and then can even drop back and play a little bit of that safety role as well. Um, Oh, and if you didn't see last week's mock draft, we kind of took a focus of going after offensive line, safety, cornerback, and then trying to get running back in those first 3 rounds. We were relatively successful in getting some of that, but some of those the reasons we were going after some of those picks in that mock draft were based on the idea that Bakhtiari was still up in the air on whether he would be back. I kind of assumed the longer we got into it, that it seemed more likely that he might actually stay on a pay cut rather than being outright released, which obviously he was earlier this week. I also kind of thought the idea at linebacker, which is very much, I think, the glaring need for the Packers right now. Um, I thought we would keep Devondre Campbell at least a bit longer into free agency, potentially past the draft, just to see if we ended up getting our guy in the draft that we wanted, because the linebacker class is not the strongest in this draft, and there's not a ton of options out there still that are within Green Bay's probably price range on the free agent market. Really, we're looking at guys like Jerome Baker, which would be a nice addition, no doubt at all. And then one of my guys that I like a lot is Tyrell Dodson, who is the linebacker who was kind of forced into starting action for the Buffalo Bills this past year due to injury. So for him, you look at kind of his grades by PFF last year was an outstanding year. I believe he was just over 90 as a PFF grade at linebacker. Generally, a solid tackler, did well in run defense, but the year before that, it was drastically lower, like somewhere in the like low 50s, I want to say. And I don't know if that's just, small sample size theater at play because of the fact that he wasn't the preferred starter back then, or if that's more a matter of, he's taken a step, or is this year an outlier? But curious to see, and I do think both of those guys would be within Green Bay's price range if they're looking at linebackers. And then obviously people are still thinking about uh, White from the Bucks, but I don't know if we're going to go down that route necessarily. So linebacker is definitely a need for me looking at this draft. Long way of getting to that with this mock. Take a real quick look at who went between our picks here, and Darius Robinson's a name I really like as an edge rusher. I do think he kind of fits some of the mold of what the Packers typically do at edge. Chop Robinson I took in last week's mock just because of the fact that he brings a divergent skill set from what the Packers already have at edge. And I think that would be something that would be, you know, he's got a lot of tools, and he is very much a project to work with because he is a physical freak. And a lot of people probably unfairly are drawing comparisons because he's an edge rusher out of Penn State, that they're saying like, oh, he's going to be Micah Parsons or something. He's not necessarily going to be that, but he's got, he's twitched up. He's got great athleticism, speed, and that's how he wins. He's got a lot of work to do on his pass rush moves that he uses to beat tackles. So that's something that he could be potentially an impactful, you know, rushing specialist for this defense, but could take his time behind guys like Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Preston Smith, to kind of work on the actual skill set that it needs to be an effective edge down to down in the NFL. Um, Kool-Aid McKinstry is also a great target option at cornerback. Some people don't think the Packers really need a cornerback as much as others do. I'm on the belief that we kind of need to just have some more depth at that position. There are spots where, I like Keyshawn Nixon a lot, and we did bring him back, but there's times where he could definitely have been upgraded upon in the slot, and he's definitely not a guy that you want playing on the edge. So if you get, another body or two in that cornerback room, because we don't know what's going on with Eric Stokes, whether or not that injury is going to be something he's going to be able to overcome or not. A lot of question marks there. And, I love Carrington Valentine, but, he needs to put another year together like he did this past year and take a little bit of a step for me to really buy in that, like, over the long term, that he's a viable starter for this team. He played well, outstanding, way above his draft pedigree as a seventh round draft pick out of Kentucky last year. But somebody that I think, if we go into the year with him as our preferred starter, is probably not ideal. So to take a look at linebacker, obviously Peyton Wilson is a big name in the linebacker market, climbing up draft boards like ridiculously after the combine because of how physically gifted he is as a linebacker. But the big question mark is his medicals, which Yeah, I did a little bit of digging, and it's not great, but at the same time, he's had 2 years now, that he's been pretty much injury free or hasn't missed significant time due to injury. So, his 2 injuries that really come to mind that people are kind of fixating on are his ACLs, which he tore an ACL twice. I don't know. I couldn't find anywhere that said whether it was the same ACL twice or if it was each ACL that he tore once. But one he tore his senior year of high school. So he ended up missing a lot of time there. It sounded like before the actual season started in his freshman year at NC State that he tore it again. And on, I believe it was Fox Sports, I found that they had him listed for 6 years that he was at NC State, and that's another thing that comes into play with him is age, and that's not something that the Packers love to go after. But this might be a spot where, devoid of better options at linebacker, they might make an exception to one of their rules in that case. But either way, it looked like it was 2018 when he tore his ACL the second time, and some websites had him listed as being on the team in 2018. Others had him listed starting at NC State in 2019. So there's kind of a gap year that's missing in there. And later on, when he ended up tearing up his shoulder, he was redshirted a year for that, I believe. And that's the other major injury. So shoulder injury, not great. Guy that's got to be physical tackling. And then ACLs are always a big question mark. But the fact that he's still performing at a physically like tremendous level at least in the testing, and you can see it in his tape on the field as well, goes to show that maybe the medical shouldn't be such a huge determining factor. I mean, in reality, an injury can happen to anyone at any time, and it's always a little bit of a gamble. This raises a little bit more of a risk for sure, but I think, I mean, it's tough. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take now. Let's look what else we got first. Let's look what else we got. Let's look at we got Braden Fisk, the other freak at the defensive tackle position that was out there throughout the combine. Where am I at? Let's look at offensive tackle. So a big run on tackles, it looks like. My guy that I really like to target is Kingsley Suamatea, who ended up going to Washington in this mock, just 5 picks before us, unfortunately. All right, let's see. Edge. I think Marshawn Nealon's another big name that I really like, rising up draft boards a lot, especially after his Senior Bowl performance, and then followed it up with testing at the combine very well. At this point, I think I'm going to. I think I am going to go with linebacker here, and I'm going to go Peyton Wilson. Take a little bit of a flyer on him, assuming some of that medical kind of checks out, and see where it goes from there. Um, After that, it looks like, yeah, Adrian Cooper went shortly after. Chris Braswell from Alabama went after that. Yeah, I mean, I think this is setting up relatively well for us, and with the fact that we've got, 2 bigger name running backs on the roster now, with the return of AJ Dillon, who might just be a little bit of an insurance policy for Josh Jacobs, if you ask me, because it might just be a matter of they aren't 100% sure. Is Josh Jacobs going to return to that 2022 form where he led the league in rushing, or is he going to be kind of trending downward as this past year might indicate to some? Remember this last season for 2023, a lot of problems with that Raiders team, specifically the offense, because of McDaniel coming over as their head coach, who ended up getting fired partway through the season. Um, and it was interesting enough that while McDaniel was the head coach, Jacobs didn't have a rushing game over 80 yards. And then in the last, I think it was 4 or 5 games, he had 3 that were over 80, 2 of them that were over 100. He was one of only 2 players to rush for over 100 yards against the Kansas City Chiefs defense, who was pretty stout in the run department last year. So, I think he's going to be fine, but it is one of those things where AJ Dillon is a known commodity. They were able to work this deal for him in a way that saved them a lot of money and hardly touches the cap. It was like little over $1 million on the cap that it impacts it. So, there's no lose for the Packers there. And it is, like I said, potentially an insurance policy in case things don't work out with Josh Jacobs. Um, I know the interior is a spot that a lot of people want to address as well. And for me, Chris Jenkins is just the kind of guy that you want. He's got that pedigree from not only his father, Chris Jenkins Sr., who played for the Panthers at an all pro level, but he's also got his uncle, who is Cullen Jenkins, Packers favorite, really, um, through through everything that he's done. It always seems though that he's got a positive attitude. He's ridiculously articulate. Listening to him interview at the combine was fantastic. And he's clearly a very smart football player. And he is like the lifeblood of that Michigan defense. Talking about, I want to say it was Jim Harbaugh said something to the effect of energy unknown to man, or something to that effect, regarding the infectious energy that Chris Jenkins brings. So bringing a bit of that to the Packers defense would probably be very well appreciated. So I'm going to go Chris Jenkins here. So we see Cam Kinchins went off the board slightly before that. Christian Mahogany, who we've talked a little bit about, coming out of Boston College, one of Hafley's guys, one of really the two guys that would be potentially of interest to the Packers in this draft. The other being Elijah Jones, a cornerback who I think, his combine performance helped raise his potential a little bit. So we've really focused heavily on defense to this point. Let's take a look at what do we have at offensive line. So Cedric Van Pran, is an interesting guy. I like to target him periodically in drafts because I do think the center position is potentially up for grabs. And with the fact that John Runyon Jr. did depart in free agency, bringing in some more bodies that can compete on the interior of the offensive line, I think is important. And then after the pro day that he had, Mason McCormick put up, I want to say he was right around 9 as far as a relative athletic score. And that's something that, smaller school guy, I'm sure the Packers are talking to Tucker Kraft about him, which I believe, if I remember right, I heard they were roommates in college, which, who better to speak to somebody's character than their roommate? And he might be somebody that would be very interesting to the Packers here as well. Dadrian Taylor Demerson at safety would be another interesting option. Somebody that is starting to climb draft boards a bit as well. High performer, fastest safety at the combine, and somebody that I think is very much on the Packers' radar as far as things go. And then how can you not love Max Melton there? But here I think I'm going to take a shot on Mason McCormick because I think that that physical testing that he was able to put out there, and the fact that I don't think the Packers are going to shy away from a smaller school guy as they haven't in the past. They've been rewarded with some of what they've done with that. So I think that's an interesting spot to potentially go there. We are in the range, though, that I do like the idea of looking at running back because while we do have a couple guys, it's not an urgent need. But Dillon is a 1-year contract. If you look at Josh Jacobs' contract details, in reality, there's only one season that's certain out of him because all of his guaranteed money is front loaded. So if they don't like what they're getting out of him, or he's not a great fit for the Packers, it could be somebody that they end up moving on from relatively soon. Again, not thinking that's going to be the case, but somebody that might be a position that might be of value to take somewhat early in this draft. Right now, I think I'm going to wait a little bit longer though, because I do like either Trey Benson or Will Shipley, and I think we might be able to get them in the 4th round. So let's see what else we've got. Hmm. I know, wide receiver, right? 3rd round. I mean, I think Malik Washington's a very interesting guy to watch. Teammate of Dontavion Wicks when he was at Virginia. You know, really, really smooth, quick, like agile guy. I really like watching some of his performance at the combine and even at Senior Bowl as well. Obviously, I've spoken recently about Luke McCaffrey as somebody that I really like. His testing was very nice. Again, smaller school, and from what I haven't jumped into his tape by any means yet, but seems as though people were a little low on him because of his tape, but he jumped off of it at the combine and really started to give himself a bit of a platform to start rising on draft boards there. And then it's always tough to go against somebody's pedigree like that. You know, just a ridiculously athletic family the McCaffreys are. Hmm. Let's see about doubling up at linebacker, maybe. Speaking of pedigree, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., former or son of former Eagles linebacker Jeremiah Trotter. Um, Interesting guy, a little bit undersized, not somebody that I think the Packers are going to necessarily go after. Um, Tommy Eichenberg's another, big school guy that the Packers might like to target. I'm big on Cedric Gray. I think his movement skills are something that would be, a nice fit within the Packers linebacker room. Hmm. Anybody out there at edge right now? Not right now. All right, I'm gonna go semi double up on safety because I do think the idea of taking Cooper DeJean might be in a safety type capacity, but take another safety to develop there as well. All right, and then our final pick of this mock draft, pick 126 in the 4th round. Um, let's look at our running back spots. So Will Shipley is still there. Isaac Guerrero, the combine darling, is there, though his production is a little bit of a question mark to raise. Um, Maybe a little bit later would be a nice flyer there. Leaning towards Shipley here. Um, this also might not be a bad spot where, given the amount of draft capital the Packers have, they might look at um, potentially at quarterback here. I'm not going to go quarterback here, but this is a range where I would start to think that Goody might be interested in looking there. Um, yeah, I am going to go with Will Shipley here and round out this 4 round mock draft with, a potential change of pace back to what we have for the Packers already. Some bigger backs in that backfield now, and I think lighter, shiftier guy like Will Shipley might fit pretty well in there. So here we have it. This is what the draft looks like. Cooper DeJean at 25, Peyton Wilson at 41, Chris Jenkins at 58, Mason McCormick at 88, Taylor Demerson at 91, and Will Shipley at 126 to close out our 4 round mock draft. I hope you enjoyed this mock draft. I'll be back to do another one next week. Um, I'll do it live again. If you want to chime in, get some comments in there, and I'll answer some questions along the way, hit me up, and we'll see you next week.